Good morning. Today we're going to have a discussion on a topic in JavaScript, which has to do with the word array and what is an array. In JavaScript, an array is a data structure that allows you to store, manipulate a collection of elements. JavaScript arrays can hold various types of data, which include numbers, strings, and objects, or a combination of these. Unlike other programming languages, JavaScript arrays are dynamic, meaning they can change in size in runtime. That means that unlike programming languages like the C-based languages like C++ and Java, in which you have to set a defined array length, that is the number of elements in the array. With JavaScript, they can increase and decrease whilst your program is running. So you don't have to set a defined length of the array. So what is the array? After learning this definition, it allows me to collect information together. So it allows me to group information together, to make the information into one big collective. Now, this is very, very important, especially if you're dealing with databases or you are having to collect information on individuals and so on and so forth. You would always want all that information to be grouped as one body. So the array will allow you to do the grouping of the information into one body. How will I create an array? I'll create an array by just telling the computer. So I'll bring my var, I'll state the name of the array. So the name of array. And then I can equate it to the elements that I have in the array. For example, I have 1, 2, 3. As stated, we can have different types of elements in the array. So over here, we can see we have 1, 2, 3, which are integers, the 4, which is a string, and the 5, which is also an integer. It's fine when you have JavaScript. It doesn't really define you to make sure that all of them are either integers or all of them are characters or so on and so forth. With JavaScript, this is fine. Also, with JavaScript, as I said, the size of the array. And when I say size of the array, I mean the number of elements that can be found here. So for example, this array, the size of this array, the size of it would be equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That means the size of this array is what? 5. Okay, now another thing that we have to also speak about, well, we also have to speak about is the way the elements inside the array are numbered. So if I have all of this, in numbering them, I'm going to start from the letter 0. So over here, it means that there's 1 is in the index called 0. The 2 is in the index called 1. The 3 is in the index called 2. The 4 is in the index called 3. And then the 5 is in the index called 4. That means that the elements in the length of this array, which are 5, each element or the last element would be in the row 4. So the indices for this, that is, if I wanted what was in here, how will I get it? I'll get it by telling the computer that go to the array I have created, and when you go and look for the element in column 0. And the element in column 0 would be 1. The element that is in column 3 is what? 4. So in fetching the elements from the array, remember that we always start from 1. And in times where you do not know the length of the array, that is the number of elements that are in the array, the last array is always going to be the length of the array minus 1. And that would be equal to the last element. Now, how does this work? Over here, if I have this array, and I tell you to go to the array with length minus 1, technically, I'm telling you to go for five minus 1. Since the length of our array is 5, remember our elements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Note, if I was looking for the allocation, I will start from 0. So it is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But if I was counting them naturally, then it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is the length of my array, which is 5. Minus 1 would give me 4. So it means technically I am writing 4 here. So the element in row 4 would be brought to me, and that element is what? 5. So this is what will be shown on my screen. With this in mind, let's see some few examples of this. So over here, I'm going to open a new folder on my desktop and call it array. And in here, I'm going to open an index.html page. I'm going to write my initial HTML code. Great. Now in here, I'm going to write my scripts in here. I'm going to start off by writing var numbers is equal to square brackets 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700. So if I want the computer to let me know what is the length of my array it is as simple as me asking the computer to take the array name, which is numbers, dot length. So this piece of code here would go and give me the length of my array. Of course, I can always alert the length in which I find. Now, assuming that everything is correct, assuming that everything which I have done is in line, I expect the length of the array to be shown to me as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I expect the length of my array to be 7. So now, if I go and open my application inside my browser, I expect that the length of the array that I will find over there would show 7. And as you can see on the screen, once the browser opens, the alert pops up, and the alert pops up with the number what? 7, which means everything which I've done is correct. Again, I can show a particular element in which I want in the array. For example, I can, if I want to show 500, it means I am going to alert onto the screen the array name into square brackets, the location of the element in which I want. The location of the element I want is in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here it means I'm in row what? 4. Why did I count to 5 and then type 4 in here? Because with arrays, you are starting your counting at 0. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So over here in my index 4, I should have in there 500. So that is how arrays or array elements can be referenced whenever you want to reference a particular array element. Again, there are other tools that we can use in arrays to add stuff. For example, let's say that I want to add 800 to my array in runtime. So all I have to do is tell the computer to go for the array name and push into the array name the element 800. That means that the length of my array after I have done that would be different. So I am going to check the length of my array before I do the 800. Then I would check the length of my array after I push in the 800. And then I would also ask the computer to tell me what is in the last array of the new array I have created. Now, if everything is correct, it is supposed to tell me at this point here that my array length is 7. It will tell me at this point here that my array length is 8. And it will tell me at this point here that my information is going to be 800. With that in mind, if I refresh my screen again, it tells me, first of all, that initially my array was of length 7. Then now, because I have pushed and added a particular element to it, it is now going to be of length 8. And when I press OK again, it's going to have the last element of it being what? 800. So you can see that everything in which I have is working. And when I was showing the definition of the array, you can see that at this point, it says that in JavaScript, arrays are dynamic, meaning that they can change in size during runtime. So you can add elements, remove elements, shape it however you want in runtime. When the user is using it, while the code is running, you can make changes to the array in which you are using. So that is a short update on arrays. With that in mind, we are going to design this checkout desk for a particular shop, for them to be able to sell items they have inside the shop. A very simple interface for that, whereby if a person comes and they are buying items, you can specify the items they want to buy. So over here, I'm buying 2 of that, 3 of that, and 1 of that. You can see that in real time, once the element is entered, the quantity, the total calculation is calculated at the bottom here for the items I am buying. Also, we can see at the top here, I have all the selected items showing there. And once I click on complete sale, it gives me an alert that shows all the items I bought and the total that I am supposed to pay. So here is what we're going to design or develop together within the next few minutes. With that in mind, again, over here, I will just create a new file and call this file array example.html. And then I will just copy out all of this information and put it inside the array example, so that over here, I will have a blank canvas to be able to design the desk checkout system. Also, I'm going to create a file for style.css. I'm also going to create another file for main.js so that all my JavaScript code can go in main.js and my CSS files can go to style.css. So over here, I don't need an int tag, and over here, I don't need the script tag over here too. The first thing I must do is I must design the interface that would house the application in which I'm about to design. So in doing that, I will start off by creating a div, and I would give the div an ID of checkout -container. I'll have to tell the user the name of the application. Looking at the design I have here, you can see the name of the application is here. So I'll have to tell him what the name is, and I would use a H2 to do that. And the name of the application, of course, is going to be checkout what? System. From there, I need to create another div. And this div is going to control the top half over here, which shows the items that have been selected by a particular user. So I'm going to give this an ID of selected items. More so, as we can see, the information here is kept in a table. So it means I must create a table, a table to house that information. And of course, the top half of the table is going to have a T head so that I know that the information in this section here, that is the grayed out section here, is the head of the table. So that information will be held in TH. That is table head. And here I have the item, have another TH, which is going to have the price. And then I have another section, which is going to be quantity. So TH, quantity. And of course, after that, then I have my T body, which will give me the body of my table. Now, the body of my table is going to be generated using an array. So we will have to handle that later. But the information here would be controlled using checkout hyphen items. Now, inside my selected items, I would use the p tag to tell the computer that I'll use the p tag, and inside the p tag, I'll type in strong so that it is going to be bolded and say selected items with a hyphen. And then under it, I would use an ordered list to generate the items that would be there. Again, the items that would be there have not been clicked on yet. That means that we must dynamically create them using JavaScript. So again, here, I'll just call it selected items hyphen what? List. And this will be the ID of that section. Under here, under the table, I'm going to have my p tag, and I'm going to have the ID called total. So that over here, all the totals that would be created. Again, when I come to the design I showed you, over here, the total we find over here. That is the p tag I've just created. And in there, I'm going to say total is equal to the $0.00. Under it, we are going to have button and inside the button, we are going to say complete sale. So the design of it, the initial design of my application has been created. When I go to my design view, this is what I'm supposed to see. So over here, as you can see, I've made a mistake here. So I have to go back to my code. I can see that there is the arrow over here, so I can remove it. And then I can just refresh my page again. And then I have this. So again, the items here would be generated dynamically. The items here would be generated from an array. And there is where your mind must come to this, that whenever you have a form, not all information would be there. Some information will come from a database. And of course, if it's coming from a database, you can't just dump it into your application. You first collect them as an array and then utilize them as an array. That means your ability to manipulate an array is very, very, very important. And how you manipulate it will help you with your design and your display and the way your application will work. So again, this is my design in HTML, but my design in HTML is not looking that good. So I need to create a link to a reference called style.css using style sheets. And I must end it here. And then in here, I'm going to my style sheet to design my application, I'll quickly start with the body. And with the body, I'm going to first of all attack the font family, which is going to be Arial. I'm going to attack the background, which I'm going to use a grayish color, which is F4, F4, F4. Sorry, I didn't bring the hashtag, which was in front. Then I'm going to tell the margins to be 0. Also, the paddings are going to be what? 0. We want the display to be flex. We want the justification, we want to justify content to center. And then we also want to align items to center so that all our elements would be in the middle, and just set view height to 100 VH. In doing so, right now, our design will have this kind of view. You can see that everything is in the center, and they are in the center because of the justify content center. And then we made it flex. So as you can see, they are all stacked up one over the other. Very, very nice. The next thing we do, and again, since you guys are starting out, it's important that you see the effects of the elements you use. And then in later projects, when you have them, you know which element will give you your desired result. Here again, I have checkout hyphen container. And this piece of information is coming from the ID we have here called checkout what? Container. And for that, I'm going to tell the background color of that to be white. I'm going to tell its padding to be 20 pixels all around. I want the border radius of the square I'm creating to be 8 pixels. And then I want to give it a shadowy back so that it looks a bit popped out and nice. So I'm going to use RGBA, that is red, green, blue, ultra. And I'm going to set the values to that as 0, 0, 0, and then 0.1. So what does this do to my application again? This should give me a nice white background for my elements. 1 second. Just make sure everything is in order. So here I have this, that. So let me check out this here. So container. Let me see if the spelling here is correct. So check out container. I think it's correct. Oh, the C there was capital C. That's why it wasn't coming. So now everything here is correct. So when I refresh this, I shouldn't have any problems. Let's see. So check out container. That's, oh, there is no R here. So again, let me refresh. And then I have it coming now. Great. Now, we go back here. We click here. I'm going to design the table. I'm going to give the width of the table as 100%. I'm going to say the border collapse should be collapsed. I'm going to say the margin of the bottom half of my table should be 20 pixels. Now, in doing so, again, our design will look like this. I'm also going to attack the TH and the TD, since they are the ones going to hold the information in the table. And we want to create a border line for them of 1 pixel thick, solid, with a color of gray, which is hashtag DDD. We want a padding of 12 pixels. And then we want a text alignment of left. So again, looking at our design, we'll have this. You can see the lines now. It's looking like a table. Everything is getting into shape. Of course, when it is a table heading, so you can see that what I just did applies to these two. But for the table headings alone, we want the background color of them to be F2, F2, F2. So again, this will help take care of our design. And we can see that the THs alone, the TDs are not showing because, again, we would be creating them dynamically. Hashtag total. And this is where the total amount will be showing. So we want the total amount to have a font weight of bold, and we want a margin from the bottom to be 10 pixels. So that would make the writings over here bold, and then there'll be a small gap between that and the button. Now, since we are talking about button, let's deal with the button. And then inside the button, I'm going to say padding is going to be 10 pixels. The background color of our button is going to be green, which is hashtag 4CAFA. Sorry, here it should be 50. And then here we have color being white. We have border radius being 4 pixels. And then we have our cursor being a pointer. So again, when I come in here, I refresh, I'll see my button is green, my pointer changes to a cursor, my cursor changes to a pointer, sorry. And then hashtag select element. Select item, sorry. We want it to be a margin bottom of 20 pixels. And we also want the select elements, select items, sorry, it's P tag to have a margin of 0. So this here concludes all the CSS code that we need in our design of our application. So when I refresh this again, I can see this is the design in which we are looking for. The design, it doesn't look like this yet. Of course, when I started, this is how it looks like. But as you can see, the information here is auto-generated. And we'll use the JavaScript to generate that piece of information. So our design is coming up a bit. Now we have to generate the piece of information, and that information is going to come from our JavaScript. So I must now go to link my JavaScript to the work in which I am doing. So here I have my script tag, and I can find the scripts I'm looking for from main.js, and I can close my script tag. Great. That means I can come here and type in my JavaScript code for my application. The first thing I need to do is I need to create my array. So here I have const items is equal to the array symbol. And in here, I'm going to have the items that are going to be in my array. Now I'm going to group the items together with their information. For example, the items are going to have an ID of 1, comma, a name called items. Let's say here, I'm going to call it Apple, and comma, and then the price of an apple is going to be, let's say, 10. So here I have one item in my array. The second item I have in my array is going to have an ID of 2, comma, a name of orange, comma, a price of, let's say, 15, comma. This is my last item that I will have in my array. So I have an ID of 3, comma, a name of grape, comma, a price of 20. So here it presents me with the items I have in my array. So all of these things here are the items in the array. Now, I am going to populate my table. So I have a function to populate the items that are supposed to be in my table. The first thing I need to do is go for the section that the items are going to be populated. So I can use a constant since that section will never change. Check out items is equal to document.getElementsById. And the section that is going to host the checkout items, we called it what? Check out items. The C here should be, sorry, the C here should be small. So checkout items, great. So in here, I'm going to get the element by ID called checkout items. So now I've gotten the element called checkout items. That's great. Now, for each item, so here, for the elements I have in items, So all the elements I have here, I'm going to run an iteration for it. So for each element that you find in there, and we are taking each one. So if I go for this one, then I've taken one item. If I go for this one, then I've taken one item out of items. So for each one, we are going to call it item. So each one you pick, we are calling it item. And for each one in which you have picked, we are going to equate it to the function this. So I am technically running a function that will work on each item individually. And for each one, I want you to do the following stuff. Create a constant called row. And when you create the constant called row, the constant called row is going to insert a new row. And inside that new row, I'm going to create a constant called cell 1. And in cell 1, we are going to create from the row a new column. So insert cell. And the cell is going to have a cell number of 0. Again, the cell numbers start counting from 0, so they don't start counting from 1. I'm going to do the same thing, for cell 2, cell 3. That means here is going to be row 1, row 2. Now, when I take the new cell I have created, because this will create the row, create row. This will create the column. So create column. This will create another column. Create column. And this will also do another column. So that in here, in the application, you can see that you have 1, 2, 3 columns to create. So this will allow us to create a new row and then 3 columns in the new row. But the question is that inside the first cell that you've created, in there, I want you to go and put a text item in there. So text content is equal to items dot name. So the item you picked here, we want the name of it. So this piece of code here is running it like an array. So you go run this, run this, run that. Now, all of this, you can't pick them one after the other like that. You need a name for it. So the name for it is giving it is called item. So when I pick this, it's called item. The next round, I'll pick this again. It will be called item. The next round, I'll pick this again. It will be called item. So what I'm telling the computer is that since I've created a new cell, and the new cell that I have created is going to be called, so since I've created a new cell, in the new cell I've created, go for the current item you have picked. And in there, go and look for the name property. So when I come here, I'll look for the name property. And when I get the name property, I'll give it to the cell in which I have created. I'll do the same thing for the other cells. So here again, I'm going to create in cell 2 dot text content. And I'm going to say that in there, I want you to pick or put, and I'm going to use, this is the double quote you find on top of the tab. The double quote you find on top of the tab. And I'm going to bring the dollar sign and another dollar sign. The first dollar sign would be to show the monetary value. So if it was Ghana cedi, here would be GHC, for example. The second dollar sign is for you to do something called in-code variables, so that you don't have to change or use the plus to do concatenation. You can write the variables directly in the code. In that case, here I can type in item dot price dot to fixed. And then here I'll write 2, so that it gives me 2 decimal places behind the price. And this concludes the code I have over there. The last one is cell 3 dot inner HTML. And the cell 3 dot inner HTML, again, using the double quote you find by the tab button, the slanted one, I'm going to say input type is equal to number, and the value would be equal to 0. And I have a minimum entry so that no one can enter any negative number of 0. I'm going to add a data ID so that I know what the person is entering the value for. So the data ID is going to be equal to double quotes, and you can see the dollar sign again. And then I'll bring this for you to know that what you are entering here is a variable, and it is a variable that is coming from item.id. So if the ID is 1, then I know it is apple. If it is 2, I know it is orange. If it is 3, then I know it is going to be a grape. Then in here, I'm going to have an on-change button. So on the change of the elements that is there, I want you to go and invoke the function called calculate. Calculate total. And when I'm done with this, I would bring the question mark sign at the back. So here I've just created an input for the elements I have in the table. Very well. Now, when I call upon the array in which I am calling populate items, so here I finished creating the array. So now I can call upon the array. So when I call upon the array, populate items, when I come to my code and refresh, I should see all my items populated. And you can see that the input tag I designed is there. The orange one I designed is there. The items are showing, everything is showing in its correct position. But when I change the value here, nothing happens because we have not yet invoked or created the calculate total. So obviously the next step for me would be to create a function in which I'm going to call calculate total. And what is calculate total supposed to do? calculate total is supposed to go and first of all, to const rows is equal to document dot get element by ID, and the elements in which I want to get is checkout items, items. And then what I want are the rows in checkout items. I want the rows in checkout items. So remember that this here should be in double quotes. Then I want to let total be equal to 0. I'm also going to create another constant. So I'm going to create another constant called select head items list. And that should be equal to document dot get elements by ID. And I'm getting elements by ID using into double quotes selected items, which we called it selected hyphen items, like this. The I here is small. So again, when I come to the code, I'm going for this checkout items, and I'm going for the selected items which appear over here, the selected items list, so that I can use that to draw the items in which I have. Remember, everything is going to be done dynamically. So I'm going to use my for statement to say for into bracket. Let I be equal to 0. Let I be less than the length of the rows in which we went for. Comma, semicolon, I plus plus. Now, here is very important because you do not know how many things are in the array. Over here, we created the array, we know there are 3. The computer doesn't know there are 3. If there was a big shop, maybe there could be 1,000 items in the shop. You don't know. So over here, you are telling the computer that go and tell me how many items are in the shop. So I know how many items I have to search for to know their quantity and their price, if they are there. So once you have it, by me just counting the number of things I have found using dot length, since it's an array, I can know that, oh, in this thing here, I have 3 or 4 or 5 items I have to look for. Now, once I get the items I have to look for, I have to tell the computer that, okay, since you have the items you are looking for, in each turn, create a constant called quantity. So I am going for the quantity the person entered. Pass int. This piece of code here is going to force any value I get to be an integer value. And I'm going for row of the I think I am searching. So if this is 0, I'm going for row 0. If it is 1, I'm going for row 1. If it is 2, I'm going for row 2. If it is 3, so on and so forth. So I'm going for the row 0 of the cell number 2. So again, if you remember carefully, when we're doing this, we said the first cell is 0, second cell is 1, third cell is 2. Over here again, we said cell 0, cell 1, cell 2. So I am going for row number 0. So if I'm going for row number 0, remember, with IT, everything starts counting from 0. So I have row 0, row 1, row 2. So technically, I'm telling the computer that go for this row 0. And when you go for this row 0, go and take the item in this cell, that is cell what? 2. So I'm going directly for what the person has typed. And when you go there, go and look for, using query selector, the input tag that you find there. And when you find the input tag, whatever the person has typed in as its value, go for it. So this piece of code will go for what you have typed in the cell. Like if you have typed, let's say 44, that is what I'm going for. So in order for me to go for it, I must go to the row, the cell, go and select the input. And when I select the input, I have to go and look for the value property because that is what the person has typed in. And once I go for the value property, I must check if what the person has typed is greater than 0. If it is greater than 0, then I can say that another constant, which is going to be the price of the item, is going to be pass float. So again, I am making sure that whatever I type would be a decimal number. And we are going to pick items, square bracket, 1 dot what? Price. So I'm going for the item dot what? Price. And of course, if I get the item dot price, I'm going to say the row total. So the total at that point is going to be the quantity of the item times the what? Price. And of course, I'm going to use total plus is equal to row total to increase the total amount and then count it. Now, once I've done that, the next thing for me to do is to display it at the top and display it at the bottom so that the user can know what the total price is. Now, the full total will be done outside of the for statement, which means inside the for statement, I just have to show the total at the point in which has been selected. So in here again, I'm going to say const selected items const selected list items item is equal to document dot get element by sorry, we are creating an element. So create an element and we are creating the li element so that we can use it to add the things we want to add. And then selected item dot text content should be equal to, again, the double quote you have at the tab side. In the class, I'll call you back. Okay. Then here you have $, curly brackets, items, square brackets, 1 dot name, and then you have your X here. Sorry. You have your X here, you have another $, you have double quote, you have quantity, and then you can end it with a terminate. Great. Now, we just tell the computer that take the new item you have created and append to the parent. So the parent would be the UL. So I'm appending an LI to the UL as a child. So what am I appending? I'm appending the listed, the selected list item I just created. Now that I'm done with this, it means that at the bottom here, so at the bottom, that is outside the for statement, I can do document dot get element by ID, and the element I'm getting is total, and I'm going to add this to text content, and this should be equal to, text content, and this should be equal to, in the slanted double quotes, total by $sign. Remember, the first $sign is for the monetary value dot to fixed. And we are going to fixed bar 2. Great. Great. Now, again, this total would be calculated the moment the person changes anything. Remember over here, changes anything in any of the input items, which means that if I were to refresh my screen and then change the item here from this to 2, and then press enter, I'm supposed to get my values changing. So let's see why they are not changing. Let me go to inspect. Right, inspect, there's nothing wrong there. So I have no problem here. Console. Okay, let's see if I've done something wrong. One second. Okay, so let's just make sure everything we did here is correct. Everything looks fine. Nothing has changed. Everything looks okay. All our codes are in line. And over here, we have select total. And then in here, we said the select total should be get elements by that. So that is fine. We've saved. Let's come back here. Let's refresh our page. So there's no error here. So if I change this to 2, this to that, that to that, it should take effect. Let's see. Then Yes, so let's see one more time. Think I haven't refreshed the page. Well, if I change it, okay, now it's coming. So now I can have 2 here, 3 here, 90 here. So you can see that the bottom half, which is updating over here, is coming from here. And then the top half would be updated each time. So each time you make a change, each change you make to appear, and then when you make another change, it will be added to the changes in which you have. So you can see it has been added, so on and so forth. So on and so forth. Great. The only thing which is left now is for us to do the complete sale button. And my time is up. So I would have to leave you. And then we'll continue that maybe when we meet in class again. But you are supposed to design this interface and then utilize arrays to build this application. We would meet again next week.